now, and let's see here. So thanks so much, everyone, for joining us today around the virtual water cooler to talk about The Internet Ruined My Life, the new show on the Sci-Fi Channel. My apologies, we're having a little technical difficulties getting Sue Chef online. She's kind of hidden behind her firewall. So anyone who happens to be online and has a suggestion for her, if you could just type it in and I'll tell her. So we're going to keep our eye out for Sue. But in the meantime, what I'd like to do is just say how lucky I am to have some really terrific guests today, two people that I'm so impressed with their online work. And so that I don't mess it up, I would like each of them to take a moment to introduce themselves. And I'd like to start with Richard Geary, a.k.a. Mr. Public and Permanent. I love that. Richard, can you take a moment and tell us a little bit about your work?
Sure. So my name is Richard Geary. I'm the executive director of the Institute for Responsible Online and Cell Phone Communication. We just go by IROC. The 2 is silent. IROC2.org. And essentially, I spend every day in a different city, in a different school, trying to help students, parents, faculty, law enforcement really understand how to use technology responsibly and to thrive in our extremely rapidly evolving digital world, and help them avoid becoming a statistic for either today's generation or the next generation to learn from. And certainly we'll get into some more detail, but that's basically who I am and what I do.
Yeah, that is such important work, and I'm really anxious to hear more about it. But first, let's move to Emily. And Emily, I'm really excited to know about you and your work, especially as a mother of 2 daughters. If you could take a minute to tell us about yourself.
Sure. I'm Emily Linden, and I'm the founder of the Unslut Project, which works against sexual bullying and what's often called slut shaming. I am also the director of Unslut, a documentary film, and the author of this new book called Unslut, a Diary and a Memoir, which is based on my diary from middle school when I was labeled the school slut. So I use personal story sharing, my own included, to start conversations about expectations for girls and women when it comes to sexuality, performance of sexuality, being able to avoid being labeled in a certain way and really embrace your own authentic sexuality and overall personality, whatever that means to you, in a way that is comfortable and not necessarily performative or forced or unsafe.
Wow, I mean, that is such powerful work, especially today with all of our digital tools making all this so public. So I can't wait to come back to you on that. But first, I'd like to take a few minutes to talk about the first story last night, because I thought it was pretty interesting. And Richard, I want to start with you, and I love your nickname, Mr. Public and Permanent. And obviously, our guests are the person on the first episode last night did not take either of those things into consideration when he entered that Piss Olympics contest. Can you talk a little bit about that? There's so many ways to go here, but I'm going to let you go with it in any direction you want.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think he certainly learned a harsh lesson. So here's the thing: a lot of people, as he said, they're after what's called internet fame, but a lot of times what they really don't stop and think about is that the fame that they are seeking, everybody doesn't exactly share their same mindset or what they might think is funny. So, it's one thing to do something you think is funny or a joke in a room in a closed environment by yourself, and you might think your friends might think it's funny or your family might think it's funny, but do you think 1 billion people are going to think it's funny? And the other thing I don't think a lot of people really realize is that once the joke is over, whether you liked it or not, when it's online, that joke continues. So you might be done with it, but there are 1 billion other people who might not be done with it. And so there are far-reaching consequences. So I think, chasing internet fame isn't necessarily a bad thing, but if you're chasing internet fame for the wrong reasons, then you might have a serious problem. So, for instance, I know a lot of people who are well known on the internet because of the internet, but it's because they have a positive influence. There's an 8-year-old who made $1.3 million last year reviewing toys on YouTube. That's a positive influence. That's internet fame you want. Right. So I think a lot of people really have to try and really understand that in that moment, when they're trying to be funny, is everybody going to think what you're doing is funny? And if not, you have to understand that you're going to get 1 billion people's opinions.
Yeah. You bring up so many good points there. And, I also work a lot with kids in the classroom teaching cyber civics. And, what I observe is, kids have not changed in 1 million years, but the world around them has. And so it's their job to make mistakes and do stupid things. That's how they grow up and that's how they learn. And unfortunately, we as adults put these devices in their hands that allow them to make their mistakes super public. And then, for years afterwards, they're living the ramifications of that. So I'm such a proponent of getting in there with the kids when they're young, before they're on devices, and having them do these scenarios and work out these situations offline and talking about it, so that hopefully we help them avoid some of those situations. So thank you so much for the work you do. It's so important.
Can I add something to that real quick?
Well, please. Yeah, it's just going to be
really important to bring up, because a lot of adults, myself included, I'm almost 30, so I'm not a native user of a lot of social media. And it can be really intimidating to think, how are we going to teach kids who grow up knowing nothing different? From when they're early pubescent years, they're using their phones to communicate in ways that we never would have understood, or in some cases still don't understand really. And teaching them in real life, kind of face-to-face situations that don't have to yet do with their social media platforms, ways to be respectful, decent human beings, and people who respect other people's boundaries and consent, that type of thing, can then translate across whatever new type of platform emerges. No matter how unsure we are about how to use that specific social media platform, I think teaching our kids to be good, decent human beings is something that can really translate and should make people a little bit less timid or afraid to try to jump in there and start those conversations.
Right. And you know what, Emily, you hit the nail on the head. And it's what I try to remind parents and teachers all the time, is the most important digital skills are social and behavioral skills. And, anybody can learn how to push a button. That's not difficult, but we have to remember that it's our job to teach kids how to be good citizens offline, and then that will translate online. So you're absolutely right in that respect. So, gosh, we could have a whole episode just on that. Yeah. I do want to turn to the second story, because that's really what we want to focus on today. And it's the sexting story. And Emily, I was so excited to hear that you actually spent a lot of time with the young girl on the show last night for your own documentary project, the Unslut Project.
Right.
Please tell us more about that episode, if you would.
Sure. Ali Pereira, who was the second half of the episode last night, shared her story in my documentary film, Unslut, a documentary film, and actually screened that on campuses and in community centers around North America now. So I spent a lot of time speaking with audiences about what she went through and how she reacted to it. And I spent some time with Ali herself going over how it affected her, especially how she had turned to self-harm and had attempted suicide because of feeling that she was so alone, that she had no one to turn to. And her story is really, really common. Not necessarily the extent to which it got blown out of proportion and she was sexually bullied constantly and for how long it went on, but this idea that only a certain type of girl would ever, think of sending a sexual picture to a boyfriend or someone that she wanted to be her boyfriend is absurd. It's a pressure that all girls and people of all genders really at that age are going to be experiencing. And so her story really resonates with a lot of the girls who I screen it with, because they can relate. They've gone through something, if not exactly how it spun out of control for her, they've at least had the pressure, even in some cases made the decision to send a nude picture that could then be used against them.
Right. And you bring up a good point. I think I was telling you guys before the show that when my own daughter entered high school, this is, 5 years ago, her first week there, one of her very good friends was involved in a situation very much like the show last night, and it was so innocent. Honestly, she's such a good kid. And she got caught up in, parents finding out, the kids finding out, law enforcement coming to the school, and it just grew so out of proportion. And it makes me so sad, because we don't take time to teach children about the implications of sexting, but we take plenty of time to make sure they're punished when they do it. And that's something that drives me absolutely crazy. I try to change that by having a sexting unit in my cyber civics curriculum, but I'm just one person. So Richard, I know you work a lot on that as well. So I was going to ask you if you could talk a little bit about what the ramifications are of actually getting caught sending or receiving a sext message.
Sure. There are multiple. One of the reasons just to kind of touch on what you were just saying, one of the reasons I left the corporate world in 2009 is because a school asked me to come in and talk about sexting. I had absolutely no idea what that word meant. I honestly thought it was a prank call when they called me. It happened to be that one of my clients was juvenile safety, but it was all offline safety. They wanted me to come in and talk about that, sexting. And so as I started doing research on it, I said, well, listen, I had never heard of this before, but here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come into your school and I'm going to talk to the kids about how to be responsible with any form of technology, because just talking about that one trend, how does that prevent them from not being the victim of the next inevitable trend? And so Back in 2009, I found everything was, let's wait for them to get in trouble, then we'll come in and have an assembly about it. And that doesn't make any sense to me. That's like, why don't we pass out matches to everybody on the planet, wait for them to burn the house down, then come in and have a fire safety workshop? And it made no sense to me. And so one of the reasons that I actually left the corporate world to start a nonprofit was because there was little about prevention. To your point, it was, let's wait for people to get in trouble, and then we're going to slam them for it. And so what a lot of people don't realize is there are a number of ramifications to sexting, or to the funny joke the guy made. Go to your point about sexting, one, you got legal ramifications. In a lot of places still, the laws haven't caught up where you can be a minor charged with a law for possession, distribution, or creation of child pornography. Even though that law was designed to stop a 40-year-old from going after a 12-year-old, that 16-year-old can still be charged because they're underage. In addition to just the legal aspects, you have an entire industry out there that is run basically off of taking that content. There was a statistic I saw not that long ago. It was 88% of teens' nude pictures are winding up on para websites or adult websites. Playboy recently announced no more nude photos in the magazine. Why? Because it's very hard to compete with all the free content out there. If you're an illegal adult content provider, I'm not saying a stand-up, legitimate adult content provider. I'm talking about an illegal or immoral one. Why on earth would you pay a model or an actor or an actress when billions of people are handing you that content through your window to the world every day? So there's nothing disheartening than when you see in a law enforcement investigation, the individual, and it could be male or female, boy and girl, happens to both, where you see the individual go into the room, they close the blinds, they lock the doors, they make absolutely sure that nobody is going around to see what they're about to do. Then they take out a window that connects them to a billion people instantly, and they do something sexually explicit in front of it. And my question is, then why lock the door? And so we're trying to help people understand is if you have a tool that you use every day for sharing and saving, primarily socially, that's why every human buys this. So if everything you put on there, you want to share it, you want to save it socially, then why would we put something onto a digital tool that we don't want shared or saved or becoming public and permanent? Doesn't mean everything will, but as technology progresses forward, it's becoming easier and easier for content to get out. That's why we all use it. And so we try and teach that preventative method. Hey, before you have to deal with a legal consequence, or a criminal consequence, or embarrassment through school, are you really okay with that content winding up public and permanent? And we really try and ingrain that into the heads of everyone we speak to, because that is socially why they bought it.
Yeah. And you're so right. Like these lessons are so important to do before the kids make mistakes.
Before.
Yeah.
That's right.
Exactly.
You know, I hear every day from people my age and older, and I won't share my age, but thank God technology wasn't around when I was growing up.
Kidding.
I hear that all the time. But for our kids, they are growing up with it.
Right.
And can you imagine, I use technology and fire all the time. Can you imagine if when we were all growing up, or everybody watching this right now, if you were never taught about fire safety, you were never given a lesson of playing with fire can burn, what would it look like outside your window or in the news every day?
Or what if you were thrown in a pool without swimming lessons? That's another thing I like to say.
Right. We passed out the 21st century flame to everyone on this planet. We know the guideline on how to use it responsibly. We just keep throwing don't at them.
Yeah.
So what we say is use it and do it with a mindset of public and permanent.
You're speaking my language. I want to welcome Sue, who finally got online. Thank you.
Hey, Sue.
I don't know that we can't.
I pulled out my old laptop. It's working.
There you go. That good old technology. I'm going to come to you in a minute, Sue, but I do want to ask Emily a question because you wanted me to ask her this question. So thank you. I was really struck last night by the fact that the poor girl in the second story, how long it took for somebody in that high school to be an upstander. That just drives me crazy. Why aren't more kids taught to be upstanders when they see each other in these situations? And where is the empathy?
I think that's one of the most important lessons that we can teach kids from a really early age, having to do with sexuality, with sexting specifically, but all different types of sexual communication in a way that's age appropriate, is the concept of respect and also compassion for people who are suffering. A lot of bullying curricula now deal with being not a passive bystander, but really upstanding and speaking out for someone who appears to be suffering, and incorporating sexual bullying into that, like what Allie was going through, can prevent that. So the difference is often what Allie was going through, which is being sexually bullied because of a photo she thought was private. She thought she was sharing it with one guy. She was not the one who did a terrible thing, right? The act of wanting to share your breasts with a boyfriend at that age, which is 16, is not heinous. It's not unthinkable. What's unthinkable is what he did, which was break her consent and share it and make it go viral. I mean, he committed an act that we should all be, if we're going to shame anything, shaming, rather than shaming her for having breasts and wanting to share it with a guy so he'll like her. So recognizing that is a type of bullying is, I think, really important for high schools to understand, for administrators, for teachers, for parents, because girls who were going through what Allie was going through and what I know she felt was that she was the only one. There was no one she could talk to about it, because adults in her life, I mean, even her teacher was kind of piling on and contributing to the sexual bullying in a way that if it were another type of bullying, probably wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, excellent points. And Sue, this is a perfect area for you to jump in. No stranger to online cruelty and kindness, I must say. But in this situation, what would you say when you don't see kids stepping up to be upstanders?
What would I say? I guess my volume's not up. I didn't hear that.
Okay, what would you say in the situation last night? What really struck me is so few children stood up to be upstanders in the situation. And why was the girl shamed and not the boy for breaking that confidence?
I mean, I just think it's the trend of today. I think it's so extremely sad that these girls are just, they cling together. They don't want to be an outsider. As Emily knows, they don't want to be part of, they want to be included. They want to be part of the community. They don't want to be part of a negative peer group. They want to be in part of the cliques, part of the likes. It's all about, I think like in the first segment, it's all about quantity, not quality. It's all about being famous, not infamous. They want to be part of the cool group. And if they side with her, they feel like they're not going to be part of a group, part of a clique. It's really sad, quite honestly. And what they don't understand is it's not tattling, it's reporting, and it's completely different. It's being concerned for someone.
Yeah, great points. And, that actually leads to our next question that just came in from our friend David Polgar, tech ethicist. And he writes, will Facebook reactions move us away from our obsession with likes? This is for you, Richard, by the way. In turn, might alter the tenor of our conversation, since outrageous behavior often leads to likes.
That's a great question. If I'm understanding the question correctly, so where somebody posts something outrageous or outlandish, maybe instead of the 5,000 likes, there's 1,000 likes, but then 40 angries and 70 sad. Maybe it'll bring more relevant context to that post. If that's the purpose of that question, I think we will see kind of a change. So let's go back to last night where the kid made the joke and he thought it was funny, right? But then when he started seeing these texts where some of them were threatening and things of that nature, maybe if we start seeing the real emotion, somebody who thought it was, like if I put something out there and there's 5,000 likes, my interpretation might be, oh, that's awesome, I got 5,000 likes. But of those 5,000 likes, they might not all be positive. I mean, how many times have you seen something on Facebook where you want to share it and you're engaged in it, but you don't want to like it, you want to dislike it because you don't agree with what's being said? So maybe if you have that option now to say, that makes me angry, that makes me sad, it will give more of a realistic window or transparency into how a viewer is actually seeing that post. So it's a great question. Hopefully that's what they meant.
Yeah, and it's a good answer too. And Sue, I'm going to go back to you because I think that you have some comments on this as well. Do you like the fact that there's a lot of different ways to like something online, or do you think that just adds to the complexity of what we're talking about?
I sort of like it. I think it's so much better than the dislike button that we were all upset about. I like the fact that you're able to give different ways that you feel about a post, in my opinion, as long as you're not cruel about it. This way you're able to comment your feelings rather than maybe posting a cruel comment. That's my opinion. I sort of really like them, because if you saw that someone's aunt died or their pet died, there was just something wasn't right about liking that, but you want to acknowledge someone's feelings or acknowledge someone that's in pain. Maybe you don't feel comfortable writing something, but you just want to say, hey, I hear you. I'm there for you. I'm a cyber hug for you. I mean, like, you love this, social media transcends all grief. And you just want to click and say, oh, a little teardrop for you. I really do like those, different types of emojis myself. I do. I mean, I've used them quite a bit. If I see someone that I don't know that well, just a virtual friend, and they just lost their aunt, they just lost their dog, they just lost their cat, I use a little teardrop. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I think maybe it will engender more empathy online, which is really, I think, the crux of what we're talking about here with both the stories last night. And
Right.
Emily, I want to go back to you. And what do you think the most teachable moment was from last night's show, from either episode?
One moment that I really loved was when Allison Pereira said, spoke directly to the audience and said, if you're considering sending someone a naked photo right now, just stop and don't do it. And I think regardless of whether you stop and decide not to do it, maybe you can't trust this person, maybe you're at an age where it's unclear who you can trust, or whether you decide to do it, whatever the outcome is, taking that moment and checking yourself, I think is a huge lesson, because a lot of the stuff that we share, and I think really dealing with a lot of the use of that can be really negative, is about impulse control. And especially at that age, it's really hard to have that impulse control and to separate what's going on in the moment, what seems so immediate and so necessary. In her case, it was to get her boyfriend back who had just broken up with her, and she was really ready to do whatever he asked to make that happen. I can relate with that. I was a teenage girl too, and really people of all genders probably can relate to that feeling of immediacy, of needing to react to something right away. And when it happens online, it's easy to do it immediately because of the way the internet works. And so I think that moment of taking a step back, checking yourself, and really being able to control your impulse in that moment is a teachable lesson. I mean, what she said was a teachable moment that we can all learn a lesson from and apply in our lives, regardless of our age.
Right. And it's important for us to remember that judgment center of the brain, the frontal lobe, that is not completely finished developing until about age 25, if at all, I may say. And so, that impulse control, they just don't have it. And so they're making these mistakes, and I did want to say one other thing. I was lucky enough to share a sexting lesson, a couple lessons with an 8th grade class a few weeks ago. And you never know if these things are making impact or not. But I did learn 2 weeks later that a friend of one of the children in my class was asked to send a naked breast picture to a boyfriend. And luckily she was with one of the classmates. And she said, look, this is why you don't want to do this. And she was able to tell her why. And so it stopped a bad situation from happening. So that's just one small example of how a few minutes in the classroom talking about this stuff can really change the trajectory of somebody's life. It's so important.
Absolutely. Can I just echo something that Emily said? One of the things that I think what we try and help people understand is, in that moment when you're about to send something, even if you have the most complete trust, and I see a lot of husbands and wives who actually will say to me afterwards, well, I do this with my husband because he travels a lot. What I try and really help people understand is the person that you send it to may never, ever have the intentions that the boyfriend here had in sending it out purposely. The husband can lose the phone. It can be stolen. It can be hacked. We could spend the whole day, and I can give you over 1 million ways that it could still get out, right? Once we hit that send button, we really have to understand that we just put it on a digital line that you can put Band-Aids over it, but that digital platform was built for communication. And so every day we see things that get out that we don't want out, because we're basically trying to patch holes in something that every day there's a new hole in, because every advance in technology makes it easier for us to communicate and share faster. To the point about the impulse, it's 100% right. And for anybody watching, if you have small children or young children, or you teach children, you do assemblies, one of the things that we always try and close up with is legacy. Diana, you said that you're not conditioned to think long-term till in your mid-20s, and you're 100% right. And so it's not easy for anybody to think beyond the moment, especially with technology and the impulse that they have. What we try and help them do is think long about their legacy. And we ask them, what do you want your children and your grandchildren to discover about you when they go to a site called Ancestry.com and they want to look up who you are, who their digital ancestor is? Technology has given us the closest thing to a time machine we're ever going to own, because technology allows us the ability to directly communicate with our next generation beyond our time on this planet. And as much as we would love to see our ancestors walking and talking in high def, our future generations will want to see that, and they will. It's going to be in virtual reality. So it's not easy for anybody to think that way. We certainly didn't think that way when we were kids, but here's a tip. Next time you see a commercial for Ancestry.com or MyHeritage.com, ask yourself, ask someone you love, what do I want to leave behind for my future generation to discover about me? And then follow that up with flood the web with things that you want the next generation to know about you and tag your name to it. In less than a second, you've just left behind information for your digital generation to know who their digital forefather was. And we really try and help. A lot of people say, what would you do if your mom and your grandmom were there? We try and help them think beyond the moment and try and see into the future. What do you want your children to know about you? Because you have a tool that allows you to leave that behind and be awesome with it. Show them, how beautiful you can be, make that public and permanent. And so that's kind of a way we try and help quell the impulse, if you will, and really plug in legacy and not just don't do it.
Yeah, those are just terrific tips, and I hope that everyone wrote that down because it's great information.
Hey, it's being recorded.
So I want to go to you and ask you to share what you think your most teachable moment was from last night's episode.
And to follow behind Richard, 1, 2, 3, when you look at the divorce rate in this country, 41% of first marriages fail, 60% of second marriages fail. So all those photos that you're taking can soon become revenge porn, just to follow up behind Richard. The most teachable moment, really, going back to really both of them, is we have to remember the internet now, you have to treat it as like a gun, really. The internet is today's now, it's a lethal weapon. We have to learn to use it responsibly. Really, today's people are using the internet as a weapon to literally hurt people. We have to become educated before we give our kids a keypad. We have to teach them, as Diana teaches, digital etiquette, digital citizenship, cyber civics. Most of these kids are handed iPads now at age 2, which is fine. But before we put them on social media, we have to educate our kids. But even more so than that, now we're looking at these adults. It's time for adults to grow up. And I just really think that, one of the things I speak about a lot is, the 5 E's of social media, of social etiquette for online behavior. But the most important one we saw last night is E for exhibits. What you go online, especially that first guy, is when you type something, he could have potentially spent 20 years in prison. He didn't know that food, what was it, something with the restaurant association? You don't know. And he wasn't sure. And he got online and he was looking up all these statues and he thought, oh my God, I could end up for 20 years in prison. You never know when an email or anything you publish could end up in a court of law. Right. Because not all of us are lawyers. So you just don't know. Just be careful what you publish online. It does become public and permanent, as Richard said.
Yeah. He said he tried to deactivate his accounts.
Right, yeah.
Oh no. It never goes away.
I say treat the internet. My biggest teachable moment is the internet is we have to handle it as if it is like I hate to be that drastic, but because of what happened to me years ago, it's like a gun. We have to treat it responsibly. And very responsibly.
Sue, can I add something to what Sue just said?
Sure. Yes.
Because you mentioned the legal repercussions, one thing that jumped out at me about the first story last night was that there's such a divide, there's such like a gap in terms of what our justice system can deal with and the laws and policies that haven't really caught up yet to the way people are actually using the internet. So when we talk about it with kids, and I know in Allie's story, actually, when she was a kid, the second story from last night, she couldn't have gone to the police. She told me because she would have been charged with the creation of child porn. And the boy who broke her consent and made it go viral would have only been charged with the distribution of child porn, which is a lesser charge. So that type of law is just one example. She ended up getting that law changed in New Jersey with her help. But it's one example of how the law really hasn't caught up to the way that we're using the internet. And so when we're talking about it with kids, it's important to distinguish between the way the world is now, the punishments that could fall upon you, regardless of whether or not it seems fair, and the way that we want the world to be, that we can all work toward a future together where the people who are being punished are the ones who are creating revenge porn sites, not the poor woman who tried to send a picture to her husband who's now up on the revenge porn site, where that wouldn't be the type of thing to ruin your life. That's what we want the future to be, one where people will not say, oh my gosh, a naked woman, she has a body, I'm not hiring her for a job because someone else broke her trust and ruined her life. Instead, the reaction should be, I'm not hiring that person for a job because he created a revenge porn site where he blasts photos of naked women without their consent. However, that's not the world we live in yet. Yes. And so that's why we have to move forward with this with kind of a safety message and a way to kind of work through the internet and the laws and the ways that things will be implemented today, but to distinguish between how they ought to be and what actually would be fair and ideal.
Right. And, before we end, I do want to go back. Emily, I want you to tell people how they can find your movie and your website and all that, because all three of you are so full of such great information. And I want to make sure that anyone who watches this knows where to find you. So, Emily, I'll start with you.
Sure. So I'm Emily Linden, and I'm at unslutproject.com, UNSLUT, undoing the whole concept of a slut. The documentary film is available there as well, on iTunes and on demand right now. And my book is available in Barnes & Noble's, bookstores, and also on Amazon, Unslut, A Diary and a Memoir.
Great. Thank you. And Richard, same with you. If you could share with us where we can find you.
Sure. www.irocthenumber2.org, or you can publicandpermanent.com. You can find tons of information there.
Okay, and Sue, I think we all know where to find you on Twitter because you are big on Twitter. But if you could tell us where we can find you and get more information on your good work.
No, it's just SueChef.com, and the book is Googlebomb.com. And to Emily, the laws are slowly changing. I mean, I was one of the first people to win the largest internet defamation case way back in 2006. And look at all of them that we're seeing now between Aaron Andrews and now Hulk. I mean, and mine was invasion of privacy too. Mine was only 11.3 million way back in 2006, and now look at how far they've come. Over 100 million. With what was Aaron Andrews was 55 million. Now the Hulk was 100 and something. So we're seeing changes. I mean, in the past decade, we're seeing changes because I thought mine was a lot. Remember, they're always only on paper. But we're seeing changes.
Yeah, and I think I would like to end this on a hopeful note because I do see changes with the younger generation. Kids are way smarter than we give them credit for. And I think two things. I think when they're young, put down the cell phone now and then and remember that social skills build empathy and emotional and good skills that we want our kids to have before they go onto these digital devices. That is so imperative and so important because those of us who work with kids in the classroom, you make our job easier when kids have these great social skills first before they take the social skills online. So that's my last, I'll get off my soapbox now and say thank you all so much for spending time with us this morning. This will live on in infamy online. So anyone who jumped in late or has friends that need to know about this information for their families, please share the link with them. And we do this every Thursday at this time. So thanks again. And we hope to see you next week.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend.
Thank you for the privilege. Cheers.
Bye-bye.